Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent Dummy podcast. Today, we are graced with the presence of Dulce Orozco. Dulce is a Latina immigrant therapist and speaker who specializes in working with people of color and from immigrant families. Because of her personal and professional experience working in private practice, community mental health, psychiatric hospitals, and counseling centers, Dulce is fascinated by culture's role in mental health and how we perceive ourselves. Dulce, thank you for coming on the Codependent Dummy podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll start with the typical two. So first question, how do you conceptualize the term codependency?
Okay. So I have to tell you, full disclosure, I have a little resistant to the way I am looking at it now, which has changed. But the way I'm looking at it now, or what seemed to come to my mind, even though I was like, oh, no, and then it kept coming, was that one cannot exist without the other, right? And that it might feel like a trap because it's like we're trapped here, there's no way out. That being said, Marisa, what kept coming to my mind is I'm so curious to hear what would that answer be from, let's say, somebody that has been studying COVID, like a scientist that has been studying COVID, right? And I say that because I think that after the pandemic, we know that what you do affect me, what I do affect you. And that made me look at it from a different perspective. So I've been listening to your podcast, and I know that on one of your episodes, I think it was the one you did with Jalisha, you were like, oh, you were talking about the codependency stages. And I wonder if we could come up with or even like consider the alternative of a codependency spectrum, right? Where it's like, so instead of like looking at it as something bad or as something good, could we give more space to it? And I know that's not easy because we would have to almost like flip it over. And I think that we would have to add some more ingredients to it. Interestingly enough, all the ingredients I kept thinking of started with CO as well. And I promise this was not prepared. Like, it was not intentional. I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I thought of, especially for people of color, women of color, I identified myself as Latina. I identified myself as an immigrant. I think there's so much competency, which makes it harder, right? Like, because I feel that in a way there's not enough for everyone, and that increases the codependency when something is working. So that would be an ingredient that we don't have. But the ingredients that I thought of were community. I told you it's a CO. Collaboration, another CO. Compassion, another CO. And the last one, and this has become, Marisa, one of my favorite words. And I feel that in a way it can be like not the antidote, because that's not what we're looking for, but almost like the on the opposite spectrum of codependency, it's co-creation. I love that word. It's like, I don't know, like it's really like something that I'm connecting with lately. So yeah, that was my definition of codependency right now, which I was surprised of. Yeah.
Yeah. Say more about how codependency is synonymous with yeah, right. So here we are, where a definition is one cannot exist without the other, feeling trapped in that relationship. And also how codependency can also be synonymous with community, collaboration, compassion, and co-creation.
Yeah, I wouldn't say synonymous. I think like if we look at it from an spectrum, on one, probably on one opposite, it's like the one cannot exist without the other. Boundaries are very fussy. This like feeling trapped and all of that. But then I think that if we kind of like think about what else could it be, right? Like,
right.
So and you know, like one of like the most interesting thing is that probably if somebody that doesn't know me heard this would be like, oh, you know, like Dulce is like such a good collaborator. And I think that I've learned this the hard way because and maybe like I'm getting ahead of myself, but you know, something that happened to me was like, oh, let me prove everyone that I don't need absolutely anyone, right? That I can do it on my own. So these are things that I've learned almost like the hard way. And I do think that when you know that that's not true, that you need people, but you don't need people to the extent where you're sacrificing yourself and losing yourself along the way. There's like a happy medium, right? Where this like community collaboration, co-creation can happen.
Right.
And when you do know that what you do affect others and what others do affect you, and not in a way of there's not enough for everyone. So if Marisa Esquivel is the only Latina therapist, you know, Dulce Orozco cannot be a Latina therapist in the same city type of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense because it's the first time that I said it out loud.
It does. So I'm just hearing how you conceptualize it. Well, two ways. So yeah, one definition is that one cannot exist without the other, but you're also defining it in contrast to terms on the other end of the spectrum and how people relate to one another. So yeah, we could relate in a codependent manner, or we could relate in a co-creative manner.
I think so. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And yes, I don't think you're getting ahead of yourself, but I am curious. Dulce, do you have codependent experiences or one experience from your own life that you can share with us?
Yeah. And I think I refuse to call it immigrant guilt because I think there's more to it than that.
Why do you refuse?
I don't
what is this
know.
refusal? We weren't even calling it that. Who called it that?
I know. So some people have called it that, and I'm like, no, it's more than that. But I think that guilt, Marisa, that so many women of color, Latina women, you know, first generation Latinas, immigrants have, can 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 um can be very good friends with codependency because it's like, you know, you're feeling guilty of having more resources, more opportunities, and that creates this, oh no, I have to be there for them. But that I have to be there for them can easily turn into I have to be accessible 24/7. And since I cannot help them financially as I would like to, I have to be there in other ways, which creates this never ending spiral, right? So I do think that it has something to do with that. And when we add in, I'm going to make cultural, like Latino cultural generalizations, and I'm fully aware that not everyone is like this, but when we add in how respect, so you have to be respectful of your elders, right? Which means that you're not going to say no, or like all these things, right? Like when you are a good daughter or a good whatever. So I feel that fits into the codependency cycle or circle, and makes it harder to break. And when you add in difficulty setting boundaries because of the same reasons, and Catholicism and all these like variables, like I feel that it can easily blow up. And I've seen that in my personal life, but I also see that with many of the clients I work with. That being said, I also been like almost on the opposite side, where it was like, you know what, I'm going to show them that I can do it on my own, that I don't need absolutely anyone. I'm going to prove to them that I do belong here, to the point where I'm being so independent, quote unquote independent, that it's like borderline harmful, right? Like it's like getting to other spaces. Yeah, so it's something I've seen in my own life, but it's also something I see with many of the people I work with.
Does a specific experience come to mind?
So I was born and raised in Venezuela. I don't know how familiarized people might be with the situation in Venezuela, but unfortunately, it's really bad. So I came here after I graduated from high school. I got a scholarship and I came here, and things were not as bad. But throughout time, things got progressively worse. Right now, I'm the oldest of four, so my sisters are triplets. One is living in Chile, one is living in Spain, and only one is back home. My parents are here now. They came here last year. And it's like this. We had a family reunion. We had a family reunion in September. And it was really interesting. So it was the first time that we've all been together in 5 years. And it was big, right? Like one of my sisters was meeting my youngest daughter for the first time. One of my sisters came from Chile, the other one came from Venezuela, the other one came from Spain. It coincided with Hispanic Heritage Month, and I was like super busy. Luckily, I had like some, like paid speaking engagements, and of course, it has to happen on the busiest month of the year. But all of those dynamics started to pop up here and there. And I was like, that's interesting, right? Like that while we were apart, I couldn't see them as clearly as when we were together. I cannot name one specific thing, but it was in the middle of it. I couldn't understand what was going on. Like I needed some space to look at that. And I think that a big part of it was that guilt of, I wish I could do more. I wish I had more time, even because they came in the middle of this really busy period. I wish I would be able to, there were so many of us that doing anything like require a lot of money and energy, and like all the I wish, like it's almost like it's never good enough. So yeah, that that's an example that comes to mind, a specific one.
Right. So even with one hearing that, yeah, you get the family back together, and there come the old dynamics, right? Or there comes the guilt. When prior to that, it obviously had been part of your experience, as it is for many immigrants, Latinas, women of color, and yet, like you're working.
I know.
You have booked speaking and gigs, and And yet, yeah, there's this
Oh,
pull
absolutely.
to, yeah, to
Yeah,
be
like
available.
even with my daughters, it's like what kind of like mother I am if I, like I'm depriving my daughters the experience of being with their aunts, which, we talked often, but it's not like that I can go to Chile, right? Like on a weekend, or that I can go to Spain, or but it's like that um guilt that intensifies. Um yeah, it was interesting to see that.
Mhm. Right. And it wasn't until after the fact.
In the middle of it, there was a lot of overwhelm, but I think I
Mm.
was trying to like get through the process of having everyone here, like working, doing this. Um, so after the fact, I had, I guess, the space and the time to process it, and the therapy to
Mhm.
process it. So I was able to look at it from that perspective. And even, like there was a time where I felt I was kind of like the mediator between my parents and my sisters. And I was like, nope, I cannot do that anymore. So it's
Mm.
it's like how things have changed over the years. Um, yeah. And again, it's something that I see with so many of my clients when they're like, oh no, I cannot do that. And it's like, well, why not, right? Like, and it's about breaking cycles. Like, I feel that a lot of it has to do with that too. Epigenetics, that so many of us do not talk about, or do not, I think we underestimate how much intergenerational trauma goes into it. Um, so I would say it's a common denominator for many of the people I work with.
Mhm. Yeah. And I hear even in your observations, so you're during that time, you were hyper mindful of your parents, your sisters, your daughters, and then, yeah, feeling bad about how you were spending your time and just like
Yeah,
very like conscious of like how it was impacting them or
yeah.
yeah.
To the point where I like big things were happening, right? Like I was able to be a Google speaker, and I couldn't celebrate it, or I didn't
Mm.
celebrate it the way I would have liked, or the way I would have done, if it wasn't in the middle of everything, because this was kind of like taking over the whole, like thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's there.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. Well, in our preparation for today, Dulce, you did mention talking about how we can be codependent. There is codependency between ourselves and the person we are expected to be. Can you expand on what that means?
Yeah, so I think that because of these things that we talked about, right? Because of the difficulty setting boundaries, because of the spoken and unspoken expectations from families, I know that there are many first generation Latinos that are like, have heard over and over, we sacrifice so many things for you. And perhaps some which have not heard that, but there are some other unspoken expectations. The family loyalties, right? All these loyalties that we sustain and maintain throughout time. Um, like this idea of being here and having the opportunities and what you're supposed to do with that and who you're supposed to be with that. Um, I think that we kind of create this persona, right? To the point where many of us might not even like it,
Mhm.
or might not even be in alignment with those expectations, but yet it's like really hard to break that codependency, because I do think that, if we like go back to one of the first things I told you, like one cannot exist without the other, and it feels like a trap. So it's like you're
Mm-hmm.
trapped in living that life, where, I don't know, you were finally able to be the attorney that, your whole family is so proud of you, and all of a sudden you know that your life calling is to be a sound bath practitioner, and your whole family is like, what are you talking about, type of thing. um so I think that's really, really hard to break, right? I think that we create without even knowing, because it happens organically, and almost it's something that we've learned. um can we give ourselves permission to explore a little bit, what do I really want, what do I really believe in, um to the point where, so many of the people I work with, including myself, it's like, oh no, like I always have to do something. Resting is so hard for me, like I cannot take naps, like it's so hard for me to take naps. And I've been
Mm-hmm.
thinking, is that something I've learned, or is that who I really am? And I know that it's hard to know, but I do think that there's a very large learned component, right? Where it's like overcompensating for, um, you know, when I have this voice in my head of, you're not good enough, you don't belong, and then I look around me and I'm the only one. My default is to overcompensate, um, which again, it's like fits into this persona.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for many people, Marisa, I think it's a little too late, or it's a little too scary to ask themselves, like, wait a minute, what about me, right? Like it's, especially when they do it on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know where I came across this, but I remember in my early 20s, I think I had a metaphor. I must have talked about it in therapy, and it's stuck with me ever since. But I felt like in my codependency, um, yeah, I felt like I somehow I either climbed on or was put on a pedestal, right? By different people at different times, whether it was an ex-boyfriend who I was with at the time. So a boyfriend, maybe a teacher, even my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And and yeah, like this pedestal of perfection. And so I took on a persona of being the doting girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
the the dedicated student, right? The determined and dutiful daughter. And I couldn't be anything but that. I didn't believe that I could, right, without falling over, hurting those people who I got on the pedestal for. And yeah, over time, yeah, especially, I mean, in all my relationships, but I remember like with these boyfriends, I would just get so far up on this pedestal where I was just this amazing girlfriend.
Mm.
And yet I was keeping secrets. I was omitting a lot, right? Next, I'm not lying, but omitting and really hiding a lot of parts about myself because it didn't fit, right? This persona, this perfect pedestal that I was on. Um, and yeah, it's interesting. Like as you were talking, I'm like, well, is it codependent on the person we are expected to be, or is it codependent on the person? But yeah, my boyfriends weren't around me all the time, but I was like performing
Yeah.
all the time. I was like doing and making choices that at the end of the day, I could share with him, oh, I did this thing or I made this choice. So, yeah, it is like codependent on it eventually turns into like a codependency on the persona with,
Well,
yeah, go
we
ahead.
keep doing it, right? I love what you said, that we keep doing it. And I don't know about you, but I feel that, well, perfectionism, it's like, absolutely. And also, um, I feel that when we do that, we missed out so many things, or we don't give ourselves credit. Like um, I've always been a good student, right? Like, and then I came here and I got a scholarship, and I really truly think that I didn't speak English enough to be in college with this scholarship, and yet I was able to maintain it. But at the time, it wasn't a big deal. Like for me, it was not even, I graduated summa cum laude, magna cum laude. I don't even remember which one, but um, like looking back, for me it was kind of like this performance that you're talking about. Like it wasn't even, I didn't even look at it as an achievement, right? Because it was kind of like um what was expected, or like, or how I've always been.
Mm,
Now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was something, right?
right.
Like, but I feel that at the time, when you're in that bubble and when you're performing, even when people are not around you, it's so hard to really give yourself credit for whatever you're doing, or whatever the hardships you're going through. Because of that, I do think it's connected, right, with that performance. I feel that that's such a key word for it.
Mm-hmm. How come you think it's hard to acknowledge the the effort or the achievements? Yeah.
Because it's never good enough. I do think that when you are trying to be perfect, and when you're trying to be there for everyone else, and when you're trying to help people, and when you feel guilty about all these things and not being physically there and not being able to provide them with fill in the blank, whatever you do, it's never going to be good enough. Um, so I think that even when you do get to that thing that you wanted, you realize it's not good enough, and you're not going to enjoy it, and it turns into, oh, it wasn't this, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah.
Yeah. The pedestal just kept going higher and
Oh,
higher. Yeah.
listen, that has, it's limitless, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
endless.
Yeah.
And then you say hi to the airplane. Just like flew by
Mm-hmm.
because you're so high up. And
Right.
then you cannot get down because it's scary. Like you look down and you let, yeah, I don't know, like you get vertigo or whatever.
Right. Feeling trapped. Yeah.
Mm.
There's really no way out. So with your patients, with your clients, I hear right, you already started to hint at how to address this. So asking, what do I want? What do I believe in? Is this something I've learned, right? Learned to want, or who I truly am, like napping. Right? What about me? Other ways that you start to address codependency between ourselves and the person we are expected to be.
Yeah, so I am big into the words we use. Like I do feel that we underestimate the power of words. I don't know if it's because, I don't know, like English, it's not my first language, and my husband is from Brazil, so we speak Portuguese here too. Like I don't know if it's because of that, but I feel that really, like, I stop them, and it's like, okay,
Mm,
is there any way we can reframe this? How can we substitute this? Like we do a lot of that. But I do think that perhaps the main thing is self-compassion, which is I think one of the pillars of how I not only do therapy, but how I work in general. And I think the reason why it's because, as cheesy as it sounds, I think that when I myself learned about self-compassion, it was like, wait, like you can actually like do this like to yourself. You can actually like treat yourself this way. Like for me, it was life changing. So I think that as Latinas, women of color, women from immigrant families, it's such a foreign concept, that for so many of the people I work with, so many of them have so much resistance to it that we have to do it gradually.
Right.
But I think that, you know, when I think of codependency as getting something on the outside that we cannot generate from the inside, I feel that self-compassion, it's kind of like that as well, but the opposite, right? It's instead of looking at compassion or looking at whatever it is, love, attention, whatever it is that we need from the outside, is knowing that we can, it's not easy, but that we can generate that within ourselves. And I think that's kind of like the parallel, or how it's so healing.
Right. I'm curious if you can share how you conceptualize the term self-compassion.
Yeah, I have a favorite way to explain it. And I'm super visual, so this is more like a visual metaphor. But when people tell me, or when people think like there's like myth, right, around self-compassion, that's gonna make me lazy, that's gonna make me, you know, like weak, and all of these things. And actually, all the research proves otherwise. But when people say like, I don't know how to do it, or that's a lot of work, one of my favorite exercises for self-compassion is when you think about like a mistake you make, right? Like, and what did you say to yourself? And then you think about, which most of the time is not nice, actually, not nice whatsoever, right? And then you think about someone you love, and someone you love going exactly through the same thing, and what would you tell them? Chances are, for many of us, the narrative changes completely, and the words you use, like you would never say the same things that you would tell yourself to someone you love going through exactly the same situation. So
Right.
all that love, all that tolerance, all that patience, all that like believing in them, right? Imagine that all of that makes a U-turn when it's going, you know, like you're sending them all of that, but instead of getting to them, it makes a U-turn and you send it to yourself. And that's my favorite definition of self-compassion.
I'm curious, Dulce, would you, I would argue that in some of the unhealthiest relationships I have been in, I have offered 100% of the compassion to the other person and 0% to myself. Yeah. So how do you help, especially codependents, find that balance between self-compassion and compassion for others? Because yeah, I think, I remember I'd have ex-boyfriends, or again, friends. Let's say a friend was running late and she doesn't text me, she doesn't call me, she's just running late. And for 15, I don't know, 25 minutes, I sit there and think something must have happened.
I did something.
No, like she, you know,
To
she
her.
must have got, she must have got caught up, and it's okay because I'm here and I can wait, and I'm sure she's having a hard time. And when she gets here, she gets here. like I, you know, so how do you help codependents strike that balance where it's not enabling? But yeah, it's not where there is compassion directed towards themselves too.
I feel that the first step, or I don't know if maybe like it's not the first step, it's in connection with doing all the like self-compassion gradually, which by the way, I feel that for a lot of the people I work with that are extremely rational, it helps to explain how self-compassion works, right? Like I send them an article about the myths of self-compassion. Like I feel that helps, like just to give this a try type of thing. But I think, Marisa, that one of the first things that needs to happen, and that is a common denominator for the people I work with, is that idea of I deserve this, like feeling that you deserve it, which I think it's kind of like when that door needs to be, well, maybe not the door, like even the window needs to be a little bit open, right, in order for us to do any of this work. And it can take a lot of time, but I think that that's kind of like a way through. Once it's like, I read somewhere that I don't know if it was self-compassion, but it was something like, it's not about putting myself first, it's about saying me too. And I feel that once we can conceptualize that together, there's more space, right, to, you know, I typically start a session doing some type of breathing exercise, meditation exercise, and we always invite in the energy of gratitude, right? So it's gratitude towards, if we use, I don't know, if we were breathing together towards our body, but also gratitude towards ourselves, right? Like gratitude towards yourself because you're putting yourself first, you're dedicating yourself this time. And I do think that's another door to think that, you know, I do deserve this. I think that many of the people I work with, if I would tell you what are some of those things that we worked on, and I do think that all of them have to do with codependency, are the guilt, right? That's a big one. Difficulty setting limits. And the other one is it's that difficulty deserving. There's a saying in Spanish, and I haven't quite been able to translate it in a way that makes sense, but it's like, so it's, I don't deserve it, so no me lo merezco, me corresponde, right? Like I don't deserve it, it's already my right, my birthright to be here, to be happy, to be in a healthy relationship. Like there's nothing I need to do to gain that. And all of that, like I do feel like when, you know, you work with like guilt, setting boundaries, feeling that you don't deserve it, it's when you can put yourself first, or when you can say, wait a minute, you know, like when you can say no to whomever. And I do think that all of that is part of codependency. Right. But so many of the people I work with are super, super rational. So I feel that explaining these things can be kind of like the foundation to do some work. And I don't know if there's one way to do it, because everyone is different, and we all, like, we see what works, what doesn't work. I do also use a lot of energy. So we work with, from an energetic perspective, where is your energy? How much energy are you dedicating towards that? But yeah, I don't know if that question has one answer. I think that we can look at it from different perspectives.
Right. So I am curious, what if you do start to share about how a client could begin practicing self-compassion?
Mm-hmm.
You provide explanations, you share the myths, initial like assignments or ways that they can practice it. And what if you do sense like, oh, they're really stuck on providing compassion for others and really struggling to provide it to themselves? What do you do?
Something like that kind of happened last week. And what we did was we invited the energy of self-compassion into the session. And we said, it's okay. We know that it's a little too much. We know that it might not feel like something you can do right now, but we don't want to forget about it. So even if it's far away, we're going to call in the energy of self-compassion to be here with us, for us to remember that it is when and if and all of those things, that it is an option. I actually, one of the exercises that I proposed to this client was, so a way to practice self-compassion. And I do think that this is kind of like, not an advanced exercise, but not the first one I would start up with. I would start up with, when I told you, like, can you ask yourself, what would I say to a person I love? That's already a way to practice self-compassion. Another one I like is, what do I need? That's another way to practice self-compassion, right? And trying to push away, it's not what you want, it's not what you should do, but what do you need? And maybe the answer is, you know what, I need to drink water because I'm thirsty. Like, it doesn't have to be anything big, but that's another way to practice self-compassion. So another one is, like one for you and one for me, like something like that. But basically the concept is, you breathe in. Let's say that you need love, or that you need peace, whatever it is that you need. So after you ask yourself, what do I need right now? And the answer might be, you know what, I need, I may need some calm. So you breathe in calm for you, and you exhale calm for the other person. So it's that idea of, you can send them that, but you can also receive that. But the person wasn't ready. And I don't know when she's going to be ready, but I feel that for now, after we kind of like talked about what self-compassion is, what are the elements of self-compassion, that's another way to tap into it. When we talked about the 3 core elements of self-compassion, which are mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. But she's not ready, so that's okay. But then it's like, can we, and I often would point out how I'm hearing the lack of self-compassion, because it can intensify, and then it's like, okay, can we invite in the energy of self-compassion? And when they talked about someone they love, right, and when it's easy, for them to send that love, it can be a child, it can be their pet. It's also like pointing out, like, this is what we want for
Right.
you, right? There was something else I wanted to say, but it'll come back to me.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I really sense with the listeners and a lot of my patients, there's just this outpouring of compassion for others, but a real lack for themselves. And so, yeah, if and when that does happen, yeah, one for you, one for me. So like a breath of calm for me, a breath of calm for you. That's one way you start to, right, kind of tilt that very uneven scale. Yeah.
And even like the smallest changes that they cannot see. So if, I don't know, someone was referring to themselves as I'm so stupid, like I did that again. And the next time is, oh, I messed up, right? Like I did that again. I might, because again, like I really try to pay attention to the words we say, I would point that out. So I do think that that's another thing, right? Like the other day, and I promise that this metaphor will make sense eventually, but I took, so my daughters are 6 and 4, and the 6-year-old was invited to roller skating party. It was her first time roller skating, and of course, like I'm feeling like the worst mom ever because she's 6 and she's never been roller skating before. So I took my 4-year-old too, and I had both of them. And the 4-year-old, they gave them what's the name, Marisa, like that, like it looks like a walker, but it has a name, like it has a technical name for, I don't know, but it has a name. So for, you know what I'm talking about, right?
The walker. Yeah.
They call it something else that was like super fancy, but okay. So they gave like, and by the way, I got there and so many of the moms are like, oh, it's our first time roller skating, it's his first time, and I'm like, of course, because we've been through a pandemic for it, like, anyways, like that's again like the guilt, right? And then my 4-year-old got so frustrated. She was seeing all these kids like doing it so fast, and she was like, why am I not like doing it like that? I'm like, well, it's your first time doing it. And like 2 minutes later, she was like, oh, still, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, well, it's gonna take you more than 2 minutes. And then I was like, it doesn't make, like, of course it doesn't make sense when we try something new that we're gonna be great at it. And then I kept seeing my 6-year-old, and even though they were there for probably like 40 minutes, like she was improving, like she was getting better and better. But I think those tiny improvements are so hard for us to see. So I was like, this is a great metaphor for life, like this, roller skating party. But I do try to point out like those tiny improvements. And even though it might be uncomfortable for them, when I call that, that's a way for you to practice self-compassion in a way. That's what you're doing, right? Like in your own terms, in a way that works for you. But I do think that that's helpful because they're like, oh wait, like I didn't know I could do that. And it's like, yeah, like you're doing it. It might not be the way we are looking for it yet, but that's totally fine. Because when I tell people what we're looking for eventually is for you to be able to cultivate this love and kindness from within instead of from the outside, it's like that doesn't make any sense. That's something I will never be able to do, and it can be overwhelming. But I do think that breaking it down on these tiny steps can be very helpful.
Yeah. So just to review some steps, we have what would I say to someone I love in a situation if we are being self-condemning, asking, what do I need? And it could be as simple as a glass of water, or it could be a new job. Who knows?
Yes.
This practice, one for you, one for me, right? To start to balance those scales between giving everybody else compassion while none to ourselves. And yeah, pointing out small improvements, because that does show self-compassion, like, oh, yeah, now I did a whole lap without falling at the roller rink. I wasn't able to do that before. It's like, oh, look at me practicing patience, understanding, giving myself context, right? All those aspects of self-compassion. Awesome. And yeah, paying attention to our words. I did like that. I guess, yeah, these are just different steps in no particular order, but yeah, cultivating the sense that we deserve this, gratitude. You talked about energy, right? Inviting the energy of self-compassion. Yeah.
And remember that you don't have to do it by yourself, because, like going back to my own experience of let me show you, right, that I do belong here, that I don't need anyone's help, that, which is not sustainable, especially when you're feeling a certain way and when you feel hopeless and helpless. So it's like, no, you don't have to do it by yourself, right? Like, we even sometimes, which I think it has to do with self-compassion, talked about who's on your team and who do you want to have on your team. But I feel that also so many women of color, Latinas, women from immigrant families, like it's just like you said, it's like pouring everything out. But we're so used to being on our own, or we're so used to not having support, we're so used to not having help. So remembering that, no, you don't have to do this by yourself. That's what we're here, right? Like we can, you can have support, you can have help. It's okay to ask for help. Which can be so intimidating and can be can make people feel so vulnerable,
right,
in Latino families in that way.
Yeah, but yeah, going back to the beginning, that's the other side of how we relate to others, that spectrum we want to work our way towards, right? Co-creation, community, collaboration, compassion. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And can you share with listeners the free resource you're offering?
Yeah. So I have this thing called Things I Wish I Knew When I Was Looking for a Therapist, because I know that it's not easy to find a therapist, especially now. So I'll be more than happy to share that. Yeah, that's my free resource.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. The things we wish we knew. And yeah, where can people find out more about you?
Yes, so I am on Instagram and LinkedIn as Latina Immigrant Therapist all together, and my website is dulceorozco.com.
Awesome. So I'll put links to both of those in the show notes. And we'll just close, inviting the energy of self-compassion to spread through all the listening world, everybody. We're just inviting that energy right now.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, A subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please